So I know you were saying that you don't recall the Aladdin series quite as much because people are always asking you about Darkwing more. So I guess you kind of have to constantly be revisiting that one.
Yeah, I have a charity auction going on right now, and one of the things is an Aladdin press kit. And it was like I was going through the press kit to refresh my memory, and I went, "Oh, he was a director on the show. I forgot that." Things like little things like that. But I probably have more memories of Aladdin than I do Hercules, just because the nature of how the production was going
Hmm.
on. So,
Well, I don't
and
have.
neither of them
Yeah.
seem to be on Disney Plus. So
I think the Hercules series is, but the Aladdin series is not, which is a shame because it was very good, and I think Buzz Lightyear Star Command is also missing from Disney Plus.
I know Buzz Lightyear is not on, and I have no knowledge of why they aren't. The other than some intercompany friction, with Pixar, but Aladdin makes no sense because I believe they have Return of Jafar and
They
King of
do.
Thieves
They have
on
both
both. So
sequels.
I have no idea of what's going on now. An executive at TV Animation wrote me a couple of months ago, and he said, "Hey, we're getting a chance to reorder Darkwing Duck on the channel." So they wanted what order you go in,
Hmm.
and he, as every fan asks, "Oh, it's the production order, it's this order," and I say it's neither. It is, the production order. We gave out numbers, and this goes true for Aladdin too. We give out production numbers at premise stage, and sometimes the premise doesn't last all the way through, or a story editor gets three premises. You had a good day, three premises are approved, but he's got, so he has to work with three different writers, and one's a freelancer, one's on staff, and the second one's got another script for another studio, and then he'll be available. So those numbers get all mixed up depending on how fast he is and what order he goes through those. So in Darkwing, all I said was the only order that matters at all, because it has very little continuity, is it would be good before you do an episode where all the villains team up that we have met all those villains before the team up, so it has more impact. And all the episodes that show the origin of a villain should come before you see the villain. And so they at least went in and doing that, although I have not seen that change yet. So I'm hoping that that was part of a bigger
Hmm.
reorganization. Who knows when they would launch it?
Right.
And maybe at that time they would bring out, series that they haven't put on the air. Aladdin, Buzz Lightyear, Tarzan. A lot of that. I mean, some people have said, well, there's a problem with the estate on Tarzan, and it's like, I guess I just can't imagine Disney ever making a deal that didn't give them all rights in perpetuity. But
You would definitely
who knows?
think. Um,
The
and
Burroughs estate has been around almost as long as Disney. So,
that's true. I guess in regards to Aladdin, I know I read that Return of Jafar was initially ordered as a couple episodes, like 3 episodes, and
what
then
was it? It was just our natural when we debuted any animated series, certainly up to that time. We would always do a multi-part episode. It started with DuckTales, and Rescue Rangers had one, and Darkwing had a two-parter. They were just there would be a multiple part to make a bigger deal, and on the Friday before syndication started, it would run as a movie. So that was just baked in. Rescue Rangers had it. DuckTales had more than one, I believe. So that, and then those things would be, so they were done as episodes, cut together as a movie, which sometimes meant some stuff was cut out, or in either direction. It was either never saw the series or was not part of the movie. Um, anyway, so Return of Jafar was just a normal situation where we would be making a movie that was originally designed as episodes. it's both. As you're making the episodes, you're very conscious that, on Friday nights before we have to show the movie. And when Return of Jafar, it was I made a phone call over the video to say, because I had met a lot of mid-level people from home video, and I asked if they'd be interested. I mean, I said, technically, we're doing the sequel to Aladdin. Would you be interested in putting it on video? And I did that purely because our budgets were being cut all through TV animation.
Hmm.
And I was hoping if there was like, if they could sell a few tapes, that would be a new revenue stream, and maybe they wouldn't cut our budgets. Uh, Now, in truth, they probably would have anyway. They would have taken both. Anyway, they were not interested. Home video, it's like the mid-level guy went upstairs and to whoever, and they, for whatever reason, didn't. They were not interested. And then they released Aladdin, the feature film, on video, and it was huge. It might have been their biggest seller up to that point. So I called the same mid-level guy again to say, still making technically the sequel. He took it up, and they were very interested. And suddenly it was a big deal. And we ended up in a conference room with Jeffrey Katzenberg screening it for him. And many things were fortuitous as far as what he was seeing, and certainly the start of that film. And he said, okay, let's finish this up as an A picture, meaning all the sound design was going to be done by the same guys who did feature films. So I suddenly was working with an Academy Award winning sound designer who had
Wow.
done the effects, for the original Twister. And I learned plenty because that was just starting to shift into Pro Tools versus cutting on film. I mean, I had done some on series, but it really, I learned many things about, the effects.
One thing I was wondering also. So obviously some changes were made to the sound editing. The Return of Jafar is a musical. Was that initially planned as a musical to make it a little more special? Because the series never really delved into. I don't think there are any song and dance numbers in the series proper.
No, and it was definitely because, again, we knew it would be, well, one, the original Aladdin was a huge musical. And we got to start with which really helped it. It started with our Australian studio animations, who did the first half of the show. And they were just fantastic. And their animation sensibilities were more Western than our Tokyo Disney studio, who did the second half. And so it started off with these, horsemen galloping over the desert. And we used the Howard Ashman, Alan Menken, song Arabian Nights. And I should have looked up the lyrics, but we used parts of the verses that they did not use
Yep.
in the film, but
Grab your
they
shield, grab your
perfectly
sword.
fit the
Yep.
feeling. Exactly. So it fit our series better. So when Jeffrey sat down, he was seeing like great animation, because they had an animator who really was good at animating horses. So those were the images he saw first. And you hear the actual song. We didn't re-record it. I mean, it was the song from the feature. And at the end of that first sequence, he said, "Guys, this is feeling pretty good." Now Jeffrey, knew all about TV animation. He was over us. We pitched to him all the time, so he knew that it wasn't going to look like a feature film, but he was still impressed at that beginning. And then at that point, after that, he basically stopped the film and he said, "We finished up as a picture," and then he started giving notes, instead of just sitting back to see if this property. And the thing that hurt is there was a sequence where Abbas Small, who was played by Jason Alexander, was trying to sneak into the city, and it was one of the Arabian Nights. The idea that they were hidden in sometimes it's hay, sometimes it's in big baskets or jugs of oil or whatever, and the guards would stick it, with swords and all that, and then they'd let it through. And our gag was he got out, he succeeded, and all his clothes fell off because they had all been shredded. Uh, so it was a fun gag, and to me it was like, well, that's part of the Arabian Nights, but to Jeffrey it was like, you're stopping the story, you know. So it's like, oh, I don't even think it showed up as a uncut scene or something in the video release,
That's
the
interesting.
DVD.
I,
Yeah,
I feel like that could have been a scene in any of Abby Small's episodes too, if you ever were running short.
that's true. I mean, I wasn't even, to me, it was just, oh, we lost that thing. And then, you know, the pressures of a series, you're just getting out
Right.
stories and, um, you know, there's a million things to worry about. So I wasn't oriented toward that. But as you say it right now, it's like, oh, we could have fit that in. It was great animation. Oh, so
So for that Return of Jafar, you bring back Jafar and then you kill him off in a really spectacular way. Was it ever considered to have Jafar as a recurring villain in the series, or do you think that for this sort of pilot movie, it was best to kind of make way for the new villains like Abi Small and everybody else?
it was more about the core of Return of Jafar was purely because I wanted the parrot in the series. If you take out the genie from Aladdin and Robin's great performance, you still have a great movie. And Iago is the funniest character by far. He's also one of the smartest. He comes up with a lot of the plots and things.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I want that bird in our show because to have a semi-reformed crook as part of the team of heroes, I just knew there'd be friction, there'd be humor, it'd be fun. We'd have Gilbert, all of which is true. So that was like, how do we bring him back? He went into the lamp, and that started. Well, okay, we got to bring back Jafar. But Jafar as repeating villain would be two things. I think it would kind of diminish Jafar, but really he was just way too powerful.
Mm,
I mean, they had infinite power, you know, and itty bitty living space.
that's true.
Um, so it was just like couldn't figure out how to do it. I don't even think I gave it much thought because the whole point was we had to get rid of him, you know, because he could not survive powerfully. And if we had some way of he gets turned back into the human, then that's just he's just another guy, you know, without power actually, because he wouldn't be the prime minister. He wouldn't have any of the stuff that made Jafar deceitful and all of that.
That makes sense. And, Yago, I think as a result of this series, like by the end and King of Thieves and everything, he is probably one of the most multi layered Disney characters, going through
Oh yeah.
multiple arcs. Like there's a lot to that parrot by the end of the series.
Oh, and we had a fun little thing going on between Iago and Abu. Kind of didn't like each other, but got into trouble together all the time. And it was just another flavor that the series had. I mean, it was great. We had almost all the voices from the original cast, and they knew their characters very well. And then we added top people to go with them, like Jason Alexander. It really helped us, especially before animation comes back. You're seeing full feature Disney animation in your head as you're reading scripts.
Right.
And as far as, by the way, on Return of Jafar, that wasn't the first stuff we wrote. We rarely start out writing what people call the pilot or the movie because you don't do it in order because we want to see how our characters are going to work and all that. Now, this is a little different because we had the feature film to look at.
Yeah,
And
you had a
this was
template.
the first time we had done this. My crew, anyway, and myself had done a spin off of something that already existed, the closest. I mean, the characters obviously existed, but DuckTales and Chip and Dale, they existed, but we changed them to fit the series. Everybody had to get used to working with them. And Aladdin was like, we couldn't just stop everything and do the 4 episodes or whatever it was while everybody else was waiting around. It was like all sorts of stories were in production as we did that. Just so that especially writing for Genie and getting used to that. So yeah, it was all, you jump in, you have 65 episodes to produce. You can't put too much worry until those first few,
That makes
until the
sense.
film came back and it brought up all the whole, let's do this as a video release.
Do you recall what some of the earliest episodes written were then, before the pilot?
No.
That's okay.
In fact, as I was saying that, it's like, were they the first things? And it's like, I'm pretty sure it wasn't. It would have been abnormal for us to make the pilot the first thing because the crew itself had to get used to working with the characters. The
Right.
best case scenario, frankly, was Buzz Lightyear of Star Command when we did that series, and too many details to go into. We do an interview on that.
Right.
Um,
Possibly in the future, I'd like
uh,
that.
the With Buzz Lightyear, we started production because we had been approved to come out before the Toy Story 2. And then in mid production, they changed their minds that we can't put this out before Toy Story 2. So we got to do the pilot, which was released on video at the end. So we had all those designs done, all the backgrounds painted, all of that. So the budget of the video could all be directed toward adding new things because all the basic stuff, the design of the spaceships and the Star Command and background characters and all that were done. That's the ideal thing, is to do it at the end. With Jafar, I'm pretty sure it was like the normal thing. You kind of put it off for a while.
That definitely makes sense, but it is fun to hear kind of some of the insider stuff. And getting back to Jafar and Aladdin and everything, I noticed that out of all the villains, Abi Small appears the most. Was it because you really liked using Jason Alexander, or because you felt that just stories really came naturally to that kind of character, or maybe a mix?
The character was kind of a useful type, and Jason did a great job. Now, had and as we recorded him, it was like very funny. He had a henchman that he always interrelated with, was very dry, and those guys working back and forth. It would just added a nice, instead of saying, "Oh, let's have another generic thug," it was like, this is really a personality we can get to know,
Hmm.
who's who can cause trouble but is not too formidable. Uh, so it was more. Had it not worked out, had the chemistry not been there, I don't think we would have recast. We would have just said, let's not do that much. But a lot of this is in a lot the schedule we had. Even if I had ideas of the type of shows I liked, I had to move the stories that were in front of me. So I have story editors pitching me ideas. So they took to Abismal and started writing for him. Then later in the series, other group of story editors took to Mosenrath and kind of added a little continuity to the series. It wasn't there before, and Sadira and played with those characters. So he started getting more episodes.
Hmm.
Um, so it doesn't. I mean, my favorite episodes are the ones that are more mythological and feel. Where there's a guy in the middle of the desert in a beautiful oasis, and it turns out there's an enchanted story with him that's almost you know would fit well with Beauty and the Beast or Cinderella or something like that. Anything that really had the Arabian Nights feel were my
Right.
favorite ones, as opposed to mischief in the city.
Yeah, and it was interesting. You mentioned Sadira and continuity. I mean, she gets introduced, and she, in just the span of 4 episodes, has a whole character arc. Like there was, I think, more continuity in this show than maybe there was in previous ones. But at the same time, you could watch episodes in probably multiple orders and still kind of have an idea what was going on.
Yeah, I grew up in the Silver Age of comics, and there was continuity in that. Lois Lane suspected Clark Kent of being Superman, which really made no sense. Jimmy was his pal and had a signal watch, and they worked for Perry White. And you had a generic kind of continuity, but it wouldn't keep them from doing stories that violated it. Sometimes there'd be an editor's note to fill in the reader, but you just kind of picked up something and read it, and if you were confused by some little detail, eventually you just kind of absorb it as you read more and more comics. And that's what I tried to do with our shows. And with Sadira, it was like, again, the specific story editors working, with that character said, "Oh, here's a story, and let's do callbacks." And since at that part we could control how the episodes would be delivered to the syndication market, we could have that little continuity. But it never got to the point where if you missed the first meeting, you didn't catch it. You would just get it by the situation and the way the characters treated each other.
Right. It was counting on the audience to kind of figure it out based on the
Yeah,
evidence. Yeah. I like that. I like that. No, not too much hand holding. For Mosenrath, I know that is basically out of all the characters created for the show, I think he's the fan favorite. Um,
yeah.
do you think the
A
writers
lot of
kind of
theories
realized that?
about him.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
well for years there were rumors that he and Aladdin were brothers, and this was a cut idea
yeah.
from a movie, and that's not true.
None of that is true. And he's named after two of the writers, Bill Motz and Bob Roth. Um, and they've gone on to produce, you know, the Ghost of Molly McGee and a lot of other series for Disney.
That's yeah. He definitely emerged as a real presence. I know Mirage was often in kind of the scarier episodes.
Yeah, Mirage, I think, was my creation. I
Mm.
don't know that I wrote the script or just, gave heavy notes, but she fell in that category of, ooh, let's get a little more myth feeling, to these people and more, you know, going with the Egyptian flavored villain, just added something. I don't know that the production value on those given episodes were as nice as I wanted. Sometimes it's people say, "What's your favorite show?" And it's like, well, there's too many now. But it was always like, do you mean in script or in storyboard or when it comes back from overseas? Because depending on what crew does what, can really, change your feeling.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors and a lot of different stages. That makes sense, especially when you're kind of overseeing everything and you get to see every sort of step of the way.
Yeah, but I mean, I ran my crews. My feeling is, for the most part, you try to put a very talented crew together, and then for the most part, you try staying out of their way so that there's individual flavors. Not that I didn't give heavy notes on every single script, but when got to Aladdin and Hercules and those later shows, the scripts didn't go through my computer much. Whereas in the early episodes, like Chip and Dale, every script went through my computer after the writer and then the story editors were done with it. And some I did a lot of rewriting. Some I actually wrote act three of several of them. And then as we got, our schedules didn't get any looser, but we got a little more help in that I got more story editors to work with. I could just give notes. I could give notes on a storyboard as opposed to actually getting in there and directing. So I did what I could. But then I look at what some other people were going. I said, oh, I should have done more.
I think the shows all came out pretty well, just from a fan perspective. One thing that I definitely noticed, having watched a lot of Darkwing recently, was that the character in Darkwing, Berzakov, you kind of did a similar thing with the head guard in Aladdin, Razul, as sort of the not really a villain, but this very antagonistic force toward the hero who really doesn't like him and would probably look the other way if something bad happened, but kind of has to put up with him.
Yeah, generally you don't want to make things easy for your hero. That's the whole point of story, especially when Aladdin, our big twist, was to not have him be a prince at the beginning, to let him remain a street rat. And for right or wrong, that was my decision at the very beginning. I said, look, people don't love the street rat. I don't want to do a show about a married couple in the palace. So, you still want to have that same difficulties here and there. So Razul was definitely like that. Grizzlykov in Darkwing was definitely, you don't want everybody treating him like, oh, this is James Bond, because he obviously wasn't. But it drove Grizzlykov crazy that here's a guy who broke the rules, got special treatment. He got a motorcycle with his face on it. it's just, in nature writing a story. It's fun to have complications that aren't life and death and don't necessarily involve the major antagonist of the episode. So it's kind of like, here's our plan. This is how we're going to defeat people. And then, oh, I didn't expect this guy to be in my way and slowing us down to get to you can build suspense, things like that.
Right. Well, and speaking of married couple, you got to basically end the Aladdin story with King of Thieves. Like you got to actually give it a conclusion.
Uh, Only, yeah, that they end up getting married on that.
I mean,
And that one, I guess that one was it's crazy when people say, "Oh, the three Aladdin films," and I finally still haven't gotten used to it. Let's say, but at first I went, "What?" Like, no, there's two, meaning the feature film that's in a category of its own, and then there's the two things that we did. But when we went into King of Thieves, it was like, okay, we're really going to make this something special. We're going to divide up the animation, not half and half between studios. I'm going to assign certain sequences to Australia, certainly the genie heavy sequences, because they could do the create and love doing the crazy genie animation and all that. Same with the songs and our casting. We really wanted to up the game on that one. Um, and yeah, finally letting them get married, it just seemed like, of course, that would be something you'd want to address because we weren't going to do more episodes or anything. And then you need an obstacle. It's like, here, everything is going to be great. He's going to have a happy ending. It's the first song of the film. And then he finds out that his father is the King of Thieves. And it's like, we actually played with the color schemes of King of Thieves, that certain colors were villainous colors. The darker, the reds and the blues, or I forgot how it was, how we divided up the color schemes. But Aladdin's costume suddenly changed as he joins the King of Thieves. The cloak he wears and all of that is now between the two worlds.
hmm.
And then at the end, when he's a prince, everybody's in like white, light blue, except for the King of Thieves who leaves with Iago. And it was like, yeah, let's do a show about those guys.
I would have loved that. I think a lot of people would have. What was did the decision to have Yago leave at the end just kind of emerge because it just made sense?
Yeah, it was something that was fun. It certainly fit Iago's personality, and we knew we weren't doing more episodes, so that reason to have Iago there wasn't there anymore. Um, so it was like, do everything you can to make it satisfying and story wise, certainly.
I'm not sure if you recall this, and this could just be false information, but it's a production question about King of Thieves. I heard that initially it was scripted with Dan Castellaneta still in mind to play the genie, and then Robin Williams they got him to return, and there was some rescripting. How much truth is there to that?
Uh, it wasn't originally written in mind. He actually recorded it.
Oh wow.
The second one was in production, all recorded, already shipped to our Australian studio. And then Robin came on board, so it was like, oops, let's pull that back. And and Robin was able to watch the movie pretty much. And there was one sequence I thought when the king he finds out Aladdin's father's the King of Thieves, and he just goes nuts. And we really had pushed things and had different kinds of gags, and I thought, well, doesn't have to do too much there. And he did so many off the cuff. It wasn't rewritten. It was like it was Robin. So we didn't have to rewrite. It was just you don't tell Robin Williams to say, that was very charming, Robin, but can you do what's written on the page? I mean, a lot of the stuff we used was the thing written on the page, just like the original movie. But he had 40 bagpipers, marching in to Agrabah, and so all that changed. we didn't bring him in to do ADR, meaning
Mm.
automatic dialogue recording, where the actor is trying to match lip movements, which is what we did in Buzz Lightyear. Tim Allen had to come in and try to match the lip movements of Patrick Warburton, who has a totally different comic style. No, we just let Robin go, so the rumor, it's not the rumors, they're true. It wasn't like rewritten. It's just like you let Robin, improvise. I don't think we had to do any writing because of that, because he was always like, here's the setup. It's like giving an improv group, oh, give me a location and a relationship or whatever. That's what Robin was doing.
Did you have to
The,
cut?
oh,
Oh,
the only
sorry.
thing is we added in, because we had Robin, we added in another sequence with Jasmine and Genie that we didn't have, I don't think, when first time through.
Right. I was going to ask if there's anything you had to cut out because, Robin being so talented, there are scenes that just kind of keep going where he is just, getting bigger and bigger, and it's a lot of
Yeah.
fun. But I was just wondering if anything else had to kind of get chopped out, if you recall.
I don't remember. The thing we added into with between Jasmine and Genie, frankly, would fall in the category of Jeffrey saying, "Oh, that's stopping the story. You don't need that. Let's move on." Well, Jeffrey was gone by that time. He
Right.
was out founding DreamWorks. But it was like, again, you're talking a home video. You're talking about something that's going to be watched over and over and over again. Why not put that in? So there's nothing that we cut. We just,
Mm.
basically expanded for all of that stuff.
And
Um,
when he replaced Dan,
go
was the animation already animated, or was this just in story reel form?
There were certainly sequel. It was both,
Mm.
because generally didn't do story reels, but this was far enough along that I know we had some color back. So I couldn't tell you exactly, but he was able to watch animation. But
Mm.
it wasn't like anything to do with the genie started over from scratch. It was like, no, even if there was Genie reacting to Jasmine, Jasmine would have been reanimated so she could react to the genie.
Mm.
It was just, deemed that's our goal, is to make the most Robin Williams, because that was going to be the big, the first video did so well that it created the home video market.
Yeah.
The second one, it was like, oh, we have Robin back. That helped, you know, make it a bigger deal.
Definitely a selling point. If we could briefly also just talk a little bit about the Hercules series,
Sure.
which, first of all, I love that show. We actually have, I think, multiple VHS tapes of just episodes that I asked to record off TV back when it was, airing before Disney Plus and everything. That was kind of the only way I could get my fix of the show.
Yeah.
And we've got Hercules in high school now. How did the decision come to make it about teen Herc and not adult Herc after the movie?
It shocked. I started at Disney like 5 or 6 months after Ron Clements, who was Ron and John, did Aladdin and Hercules and many other great things.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and they thought, oh, this is perfect for Tad because we're setting up he can do a Superman series. And they were shocked that, wait, you did the teenager. And I said, well, we're doing Superboy because, again, for television, it's easier and, to me, more interesting to show a character who's not fully formed. You know how he's going to end up, but he's a teenager, and I mean, it pleases me that now little clips of the show are popping up on YouTube. Um, and there was one where he's working with Aphrodite to, bring the statue to life. And Hercules is going, could she be a little more curvy? And, Aphrodite said, yeah, I know what you're going for. You a little curvier. And it was like, you're kind of being a scummy teenager. Oh, I guess, well, hormones are hormones. Um, so, I mean, the decision was, I mean, basically, we sold the idea of the series on actually a different premise. It was, he was a teenager, and we had one of the muses in, and Phil, It was just smaller. And even though it got approval by Michael Eisner, our president of our division said, "You don't have a series yet." He said, "You go." And we were kind of, he was kind of new at that point. I mean, a lot of experience, but new to us. And we're kind of saying, well, Michael Eisner feels like we got a series. But he made us go in and really figure out episode types and what are you going to do. And that led to the high school, which brought in all these other deities as teenagers, or if not deities, at least. No, Apollo was a teen there. It just made it a lot more fun. It was, and everybody is not their final form. They're not majestic. And we created, a couple of new characters with Cassandra and Icarus, who were good foils and a different kind of humor to, put around Hercules. So it wasn't just this loner going through. It's like, here's the team that we kind of root for.
And unlike the Aladdin series, we've got the main villain, we've got Hades as a constant presence in the show, which I definitely appreciate.
Yeah.
I mean, James Woods was definitely down to play ball with that character.
Oh yeah, that was great having him. It was so neat having him instead of somebody imitating him, because he could just go off and he knew the character so well. He gave us fresh material, because he improvised also. Um, and it wasn't a case of he's too powerful. It's like, no, it's Hercules who's in more trouble, but it's kind of like you could take the rules of the feature film and bring it into the series. It wasn't that direct antagonist type thing.
Right, and he could also, send monsters out like he does in the movie. He could, kind of be the puppet master sometimes or directly oppose him. I mean, I remember as a kid thinking, well, wait, Hades isn't supposed to know Hercules is still alive. And then I thought, no, it's fun. I'm okay with this. And
Yeah.
hopefully most people also had the same logic.
Yeah. I mean, again, we kind of operate with the don't think too hard about it.
Right. And I really loved that, especially, as I got older and, learned more about Greek mythology, just like you were talking about how some of the best Aladdin episodes, your favorites, were the ones that leaned into the Thousand One Nights. You got a lot of mileage out of the Greek myths. You had a very big well to draw from.
That's true. Now, uh, Bob Schooley and Mark McCorkle were executive story editors. Had they moved up to producers yet? I think that was in Buzz Lightyear. Anyway, they were in a lot of ways Hercules script wise is their show. They're brilliant. They're a brilliant writing team. They went on to create Kim Possible and do Madagascar spinoffs. And uh, they actually wrote a feature film that Arnold Schwarzenegger was going to star in. And then he decided to become governor of California instead. So their career would have gone a whole different way, I'm sure. Anyway, they're brilliant, and they really, the premises ran past me, but I never put their scripts through my computer. There was no reason to. They were they were brilliant at casting and then writing for the person. So when they brought in Thor, the idea of having Bill Macy do his Fargo accent as Thor instead of somebody doing false Shakespeare was hilarious. And they even apologized to him. We're sorry that you probably get asked this all the time. He says, "No, I love doing this. I can't do it around the house. My wife would kill me. She's so tired of it." So they were brilliant at then tweaking the script to fit the vocal patterns and speech patterns of the guest star. And it wasn't a case of, oh, we're going to use big name star uh, because that'll bring more viewers. Generally, I don't think that works in a kid show because they don't know who the stars are by name, and they're probably just watching the show. They're not reading newspaper articles about the show coming. But I just thought that the casting was, they treat it as a live action thing as opposed to, we had brilliant voice actors that we've used in every show, and I swear by them in many cases. But the idea here is like, no, part of it is casting a character type, and rather than writing it and then working with a voice actor to come up with something that captures that flavor, you have the, instead of saying, can you do this like Bill Macy did in Fargo? And that's a case where our voice actors could have done it. But some of the more subtle things, it was like, no, it's um, Lisa from, I'm blanking now, from Seinfeld played Phoebe.
I think it was Friends.
Friends, yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
That's all good.
What's Lisa's last name? Anyway, she brought so much to Aphrodite, except strangely, in her first recorded episode, um, our voice director would always start um, saying, "We want to make sure we get everything on page, but then you can have fun with it and keep the spirit, keep the story point, but move on." And for whatever reason, he did not say that at that session. And so we started, and it was like, oh, where's the fun? Did we make a mistake here? And then I realized that, and I got on the mic and gave the same speech saying, you're allowed to improvise. And then the director said, oh, wait, I didn't say that. And then he went and repeated it. And man, it was like the limelight was brought on. She brought so much to it and so loose and adding in jokes. And, she was just brilliant. Now, later on, we had to do some episodes where we had somebody imitating her, and it didn't have the same spark. The writing was still good, but you didn't get that little unexpected, flavor to it.
I mean, the one episode, and this ties back to Aladdin, the one that blew my mind as a kid was when Jafar shows up in the underworld and we get the team up of him and Hades. Do you remember how that one came about?
That was just, stunt casting. That was a stunt where it's like, oh, it occurred to, I don't even know who, I don't think it was, certainly pretty sure it wasn't my idea, but it was like, the early Fantastic Four comics, it was like, hey, what if Doctor Doom teamed up with the Submariner? It's like, ooh, at that time, those were the two major villains. Of course, that was only issue number 6, I think. But it's just like, it's the reason why, again, in comics, there's that, the two heroes meet each other and they always start out with a fight because they misunderstand something, and then they become best friends, team up. So it was just like what major guys, made sense in our supernatural thing. That might have been one of those things also that if we had to ask permission from too many people, it probably wouldn't have been done. But nobody was watching at the time, meaning within the company that, waved a flag of any sort.
I'm almost a little surprised. Maybe it's just because there weren't any real plots that you could think of, or I'm most surprised that Mechanicles from the Aladdin TV show, who was, such a Greek character, I'm almost surprised that he never popped up on Hercules somewhere.
You would think, but again, it's up to, if I had the same role as a major story editor, if I had to worry about that, he probably would have, because Mechanicles was basically, how do we do Megabolt in the Aladdin world? But Mark and Bob they weren't part of Darkwing, and they just took it. They had a billion stories that they were, and ideas to take from. So again, I didn't get in the way of ordering people to do, specific ideas. We would talk, we'd brainstorm and things like that. But obviously, they did a brilliant job.
Oh yeah, I mean, both the Aladdin Hercules series a lot of fun, and I'm definitely hoping that Aladdin will make its way to Disney Plus because I think, more people should be able to see it.
Yeah, it's Lisa Kudrow, by the way. I looked it up.
Thank you.
It was driving me crazy. Yeah.
I was more of I'm more of a Seinfeld guy than a Friends guy, so I don't think I would have popped up to me either.
Right.
But I appreciate again you taking the time to talk about the productions of these series. I'm learning a lot. It's very interesting and it's a lot of fun to revisit. hopefully sometime I can also talk about Buzz Lightyear. And were you involved with the Tarzan series?
No,
Okay,
I
just
was at that time. Generally, we switched off the various creative teams. So it's like after Darkwing Duck, well, who was it? It was, you know, whatever. It's like, well, I'm developing one series, like Greg Weisman would have been developing Gargoyles. And
mm,
then, the only time we had to do back to back was Hercules and Buzz Lightyear. And as it was toward the end, that had never been done before because you always want to get a head start. And I talked to Mark and Bob and I said, we have to treat Fridays as Buzz Lightyear Day and just pretend that Hercules doesn't exist and just do Buzz Lightyear. And I couldn't get them to do it because there's always something you can do.
right.
There's to make something better. There's a rewrite you want to get back to, or something, and an edit you have to do, or a meeting you have to have with writers or story editors. I did do a lot of, I mean, that's more of a Buzz Lightyear thing. I did do a lot of initial development and created characters and things like that they could, but it was that they could use. But it wasn't really until Aladdin was over and locked because it was so much a part of them again in the rewriting I'm talking about, and the casting and all that, that they could finally start, concentrating on uh, Buzz Lightyear while I could do post production on all the Hercules stuff.
That makes sense. It's probably a lot, but it all
Yeah,
turned out really well.